All right, welcome back, fifth graders. Here we go, Bobcats. We're going to do a little more estimating today with decimals. We're going to take specifically a look at whether we need to estimate or we need to find an exact answer. Notice up there, that's what we're looking at. Our objective today is exactly that. I will solve problems by using an estimate or an exact answer. Estimate is a round. We talked about rounding and estimating. It's not the exact answer. So we've got to determine from the question and from the information given, what are we being asked to solve? So let's take a look. Go ahead and open your book, if you would, please. I'm going to open it up to page 315. I'm going to use a purple marker today. So go ahead. The page number is right there on the bottom. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our problem here. It says Mrs. Trainer needs to purchase a classroom response clicker and a new calculator. A clicker costs $31.99. That sounds like that's important. And a calculator costs $11.75. About how much? That's really key, isn't it? We talked about that key phrase last time. About how much money will it cost? That tells me that we are going to estimate. Whenever you have a about how much, that should be a clue in your head going, I know that word, that phrase. That tells me I'm going to be estimating. Not going to be finding an exact. Going to be finding an estimate. So let's fill this out. So first off, what facts do we know? We know that she is going to buy a clicker, like we've talked about, a calculator for. And how are we going to find this out? Well, whenever you are finding a total, and that's what we're finding, right? A clicker and a calculator. Whenever you're finding a total, many of you already know, total equals a plus sign. We are going to be adding. So, what do we need to find about how much it will cost to buy the clicker and calculator? I guess it's cost is what they want us to put there, something like that. All right, you will, as we just talked about, we're going to add. Why? Because we are finding a total. That's why. All right, so since we are estimating, why are we estimating? Because it asks us about how much. That's why we're estimating. So like we did yesterday, we are estimating these two. We are estimating these to the nearest whole dollar. Whole dollar meaning the ones column. So if we're estimating these to the ones column, it means we're estimating this one to the 1 here. The 9 is going to make it get bigger, so this is about $32. Estimating to the ones column, the 7 is going to make it get bigger. This is about $12. So when we estimate these two together, we have 32 plus 12, or $44 approximately. It is about $44. So is this going to be reasonable? Estimate another way. Well, instead of rounding to the nearest whole dollar, what if we rounded to the nearest $10? So let me go ahead and write that over here. So we have $31.99 and we have $11.75. So if we rounded that to the tens column, go ahead and get yellow here. So if we rounded this to the tens column instead of the ones column, that would be 30, and this would be 10, for a total of 40. So it would be very close, right? If we are going to estimate that, notice 40 and 44, they are very similar, very close to one another. They're both reasonable answers, whether you're doing it to the 1 or whether you're doing it to the 10 like we did in yellow down here. Either way, of course, the closer you are to the decimal, or the further right you are on the place value chart, the more accurate your estimate's going to be. That's why this 44 is going to be a little closer than our actual answer than this 40 is. But it's a lot easier. All right, let's go ahead and turn the page. Let's take a look at another example here. It says Madison, my niece, drove to her grandparents' house. They drove 58 6/10 miles in the first hour, 67 2/10 miles in the second hour, 60.5 miles in the third hour. They followed the same route to return home. About how far did Madison's family travel? All right, let's take a look at that question. What do we notice about that question? What is the phrase that gives it away? About how far? We know that is going to be an estimate, right? That is an estimate. I'm abbreviating here so I don't write on Madison. About how far? So about how far did they go? Well, let's take a look at these important numbers. We have 58 6/10, we have 60.5, and we have 67.5. So what are they asking us? About how far? So what facts do we know? So we know how far she has gone on these 3 different days here. What do we need to find? We need to find about how far they went. So when we're asking about how far they traveled, we're asking again for a total. And whenever you're asked to find a total, whether that's your amount at a grocery store or the number of miles you traveled, you are going to be adding, or in some cases you're going to be multiplying, but not in this case. We're going to be adding these amount of miles. So we have 67 2/10. Let's go ahead and write 67 2/10 down here in our solve. We have, oops, I better write a little smaller, 58 6/10. And what was the final number? It was 60.5. So we are going to estimate. Now in this case, it doesn't tell us what to estimate to. So we kind of have to use some common sense here, right? So what makes more sense? Does it make more sense to round to the nearest tens, the nearest ones, or the nearest tenths? Well, I guess it wouldn't make much sense to round to the nearest tenths. Tenths, right? The TH doesn't make much sense rounding here. This is going to give us a more exact answer than rounding to the tens column. Like I said, the further right you go, the more exact it's going to become, the closer your estimate's going to come. But I think probably just rounding to the nearest 10 is going to be really easy, and it's going to give us an estimate. So let's round to the nearest tens here first. So 67 gets rounded to approximately 70. 58 gets rounded approximately to 60, and 60.5 gets rounded approximately to 60. All right, so let's add this together. 70 plus 60 plus 60. What is that going to be? 12 plus 7 is 19. Add our 0, so it's approximately 190. What if I had rounded to the nearest 1? What would that have been? Well, 67 would be what? 67. And 58 would be 59. And 60.5 would be 61. So you can see how much more difficult. That's not something we can simply do in our head, is it? Well, let's figure it out. 9 plus 1 is 10. 10 plus 7 is 17. 6 plus 5, 11 plus 6 is 17, plus 1 is 18. So you can see that they're really close together, 190 and 187, whether we're rounding to the tens or we're rounding to the ones. They're very close in this case. So since they're both the same, I guess we can definitely check for reasonableness. It is approximately that. All right, so let's go back to our objective now. We're going to take a look at this. We're going to determine whether it is an estimate or whether we are going to be looking at an exact. So an estimate is exactly that, what we've been doing. It's about the right number. An exact is a precise number, an exact number. We're going to be able to tell that by looking at the question. So, number 1 here. Let's take a look at this. A restaurant can make 95 dinners each night. The restaurant has been sold out for 7 nights in a row. How many dinners were sold during this week? Well, what is the question asking? About how many dinners were sold this week? We have that key phrase, don't we? I misread that. How many dinners were sold, not about how many. My mind was thinking about. Had it been about, it would have been an estimate. This is exact. How many dinners? So yes, it is definitely going to be an exact. Okay? Had it said about, and I'll write it down. Whenever you have that word about, that's going to be our estimate. All right, I'd like you to go ahead and read number 2. And then again, I would like you to tell me, is it an estimate that you're finding, or is it an exact number you're finding? Pause the video now, and then come back for the solution. Okay, so since it is asking here about how much, that should tell us that we are estimating. We are estimating. We are estimating about how much, is going to be left over. So we need to estimate. So let's go ahead and do that estimate. We get a number that we'll be able to one will be able to see. 4.3 is about 4. 5.2 is about 5. 4.8 is about 5. 8.4 is about 8. 7.6 is about 8. Let's add all these up. I know 5 and 5 is 10. I know 8 and 4. That's add all those 3 together. 16 and 4 is 20. So I'm going to take that 20 plus that 10. That is a grand total of 30. That is my estimate for the outside of this garden. All right, number 4. Go ahead and read number 4. Tell me if it's an estimate or an exact. Solve the problem. Pause the video now. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and solve this problem. 4 friends ordered 2 pizzas. The cost of each pizza is $13.80. About how much? There's that about again. We know that we are estimating. Will it cost for both pizzas? We don't really need to know how many friends there are, right? Just that they ordered 2 pizzas. The cost of each pizza is $13.80. So that means we're going to have 2 pizzas, $13.80. They're both the same cost. If we are estimating, let's go ahead and estimate these 2 numbers. When we are wanting to know the total cost, that means we are adding. Why are we adding, Mr. Day? Because we want to know a total. We want to know how much it costs. So $13.80 is about $14. So it would be a total of about $28. Or if we rounded to the nearest 10, in this case, if we rounded to the nearest 10, that would be what? 10 and 10 or 20. Either rounding to the ones or rounding to the tens column. All right, go ahead and do number 5. Read the problem. Solve it. Is it exact? Is it an estimate? Pause the video now and come back for the answer. All right, so it says Ann bought 2 shirts for $28.95 each, a skirt for $33.95, and sales tax was $3.71. About how much did she pay? Well, that tells me that I'm estimating. Did you notice here? She bought 2 shirts. That number needs to be doubled, doesn't it? So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite these numbers here. So $28.95, but that needs to be written twice because she bought 2 shirts, it said. She also bought a skirt for $33.95, and tax was $3.71. So let's go ahead and estimate this. We're getting a total. So let's go ahead and draw our little arrows here. So let's go ahead. What sounds more reasonable? Rounding to the nearest tens column, rounding to the nearest ones column. I think the nearest tens column looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and round $28.95. That's going to be about 30, which means that's going to be about 30. $33.95, that is about 30. And that's just going to get forgotten about. So it is about $90, thereabouts. Very close. $90. Okay. So what did we learn today? What did we talk about? We talked about numbers that are going to be exact and answers that are going to be estimates. So in your discussion, using your sentence frame there, using our academic vocabulary, in summary, today I learned when I use exact and when I use estimate. So when it asks me about how much, that tells me that I am finding an estimate.